The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when Marcus Sterling ordered a $5,000 bottle of vintage Krug for the table. He wasn't just celebrating his freedom. He was celebrating the perfect heist. He had successfully hidden $12 million in offshore assets, leaving his ex-wife Gabriel with nothing but a used sedan and a broken heart. He raised his glass, laughing to his colleagues. I stripped her bare, boys, and her pathetic father sat there and couldn't do a damn thing about it. But Marcus made a fatal calculation. He didn't know that the pathetic old man he was mocking wasn't just a retired watch repairman. He was a man who operated in the shadows of the economy Marcus only pretended to understand. Marcus had won the battle, but he had just started a war he couldn't survive. The air inside the Obsidian Manhattan's most exclusive members-only steakhouse smelled of aged leather, truffle oil, and unbridled arrogance. It was a Friday night in November, and the city outside was being lashed by freezing rain. But inside, under the warm amber glow of the chandeliers, Marcus Sterling felt invincible. Marcus was 38, a senior partner at Vanguard and Pierce, one of the city's most ruthless private equity firms. He wore his success like armor, a bespoke Savile Row suit, a Patek Philippe Nautilus on his wrist, and a smile that had charmed juries and boardrooms alike. But tonight, that smile was sharper than usual. It was predatory. To the single life, Marcus announced, raising a crystal flute. Around the circular booth sat his court, Jason, a junior analyst, desperate for approval, Greg, a divorced corporate liability lawyer who lived vicariously through Marcus, and Sylvia, a shark of a real estate agent who was eyeing Marcus now that he was technically on the market. "So it's done?" Greg asked, leaning in. "Signed, sealed, delivered. The judge stamped it at 4:00 p.m. today," Marcus said, savoring the sip of champagne. "Gabriel Sterling is officially Gabriel Vance again, and I am officially a free man." "And the assets?" Jason asked, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Did she, you know?" Marcus chuckled, a low, rumbling sound deep in his chest. "She got the apartment in Queens," he said dismissively. "She got the 2018 Honda. She got her grandmother's jewelry, which I generously agreed not to appraise." Sylvia raised an eyebrow. "That's it, Marcus. You've been pulling in 7 figures for 5 years. She didn't fight for the portfolio, the Hamptons deed." "She tried," Marcus said, leaning back and spreading his arms. "Or rather, her lawyer tried. A strip mall attorney she found on Google. But here's the beauty of it. You can't split what doesn't exist." The table went quiet as they realized what he meant. "I spent 2 years moving liquidity." Marcus bragged, his ego getting the better of his discretion. "Shell companies in Malta, crypto cold wallets, physically stored in a safety deposit box in Zurich. By the time we got to discovery, my net worth on paper looked like I was barely scraping by. I pleaded market volatility. I pleaded bad investments. I sat there in mediation, looked her right in the eyes with a tear in my eye, and told her, 'Gabriel, I'm ruined. I'm doing this for you so you don't inherit my debt.'" "You are evil," Sylvia said. But she was smiling. In their world, this wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. "And she bought it?" Greg asked. "Hook, line, and sinker." Marcus nodded. "She's soft. She always was. She just wanted peace. She wanted to move on. She looked at me with those big, wet doe eyes and said she didn't care about the money, she just wanted out." He took another drink, feeling the warmth of the alcohol mix with the adrenaline of victory. "The best part," Marcus continued, "was her father, Arthur." "The little old guy?" Jason asked. "I met him at your Christmas party once. Doesn't he fix clocks or something? Antique watches." Marcus corrected with a sneer. Has a dusty little shop in the Lower East Side. Smells like sawdust and old men. He came to the final arbitration. Sat in the corner in a cardigan that looked like it was knit during the Carter administration. Didn't say a word. Just watched me. Marcus mimicked a trembling old man holding a cane. I thought he was going to have a stroke when I said I couldn't pay alimony. I almost felt bad. Almost. The table erupted in laughter. Marcus basked in it. He felt like a king who had just conquered a neighboring land and salted the earth. He checked his phone. A notification from his banking app showed a balance transfer completing. The first chunk of his hidden wealth was being washed back into a clean account under a generic LLC name. $3 million instantly accessible. What about Gabrielle? Jason asked. Where is she going to go? Back to Daddy's, I assume. Marcus shrugged, signaling the waiter for another bottle. She can sleep on a cot in the back of his shop. Listen, I gave her the best years of my life. I paid for her art classes. I paid for her therapy. If she couldn't monetize her creativity by now, that's not my problem. Darwinism, my friends. Survival of the smartest. Meanwhile, 10 miles away, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The rain hammered against the foggy windows of a small, narrow shop on Orchard Street. The sign above the door, hand-painted in gold leaf that was peeling slightly, read, Vance Chronometers, Est, 1968. Inside the shop was silent, except for the rhythmic, collective ticking of 300 mechanical clocks. It was a sound that drove some people mad, but for Gabrielle Vance, it was the sound of safety. It was the heartbeat of her childhood. Gabrielle sat on a wooden stool staring at the divorce decree in her hands. She was 34, but tonight she looked younger, smaller. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "He won, Dad," she whispered. "He really won." Arthur Vance stood behind the main counter, wearing a jeweler's loop on his forehead and a beige cardigan, the very one Marcus had mocked. He was 72, with thinning grey hair and hands that were calloused but possessed a surgeon's steadiness. He was polishing the brass casing of a 19th century maritime chronometer. He didn't look up immediately. He carefully placed the polishing cloth down and adjusted his spectacles. "Define winning." "Ellie," Arthur said softly. His voice was gravelly calm, devoid of the panic that Gabrielle felt. "He kept everything," she said, her voice trembling. "The accounts are empty, Dad. He says the investments failed, but I know him. I saw the way he looked at me today. He was laughing behind his eyes. He has millions hidden somewhere, and I have nothing. I'm 34, and I have to move back into my childhood bedroom." "There is no shame in this house," Arthur said firmly. He walked around the counter, his limp barely noticeable a souvenir from a life he rarely spoke about. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are free of a man who did not value you. That is a victory." "But it's not fair," Gabrielle cried, slamming the paper down on the glass counter. "He lied to the court. He gaslighted me for years. And now he gets to walk away and live like a king while we worry about the heating bill. You worked so hard your whole life, and he called you a peasant to my face, Dad. He called you a nobody." Arthur's face didn't change, but his eyes, steely blue and frighteningly intelligent, darkened by a fraction. "He said that?" Arthur asked. "He said you were a useless tinkerer, and that I was destined to be poor just like you." Arthur sighed a long, weary exhale through his nose. He turned back to the wall of clocks. He reached out and adjusted a pendulum on a grandfather clock that was off by a millisecond. Marcus Sterling is a man who understands the price of everything and the value of nothing, Arthur said. He sees a watch and sees gold and diamonds. He does not see the gears. He does not see the tension in the mainspring. Arthur turned back to his daughter. Did he sign the waiver? Arthur asked. The one relinquishing all claims to any future inheritance or family assets of the Vance line. Gabriel wiped her eyes, confused. Yes, his lawyer laughed at it. He said, I don't want your father's rusty spare parts. He signed it without even reading the appendix. Good, Arthur said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a trap snapping shut. Why does that matter? Gabriel asked. We don't have any assets, Dad. We just have the shop. Arthur walked over to the heavy steel safe in the back of the room. It wasn't a modern digital safe. It was an antique, intricate iron beast from the 1920s. He spun the dial with a speed and precision that blurred his fingers. Left 40 right, 10, left 85. Click. The heavy door groaned open. Gabriel expected to see watches, maybe some cash. Instead, Arthur pulled out a single thick leather binder. It was old-worn and stamped with a faded emblem that looked like a globe held by a gauntlet. He carried it to the counter and laid it down next to the divorce papers. Ellie, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious in a way she had never heard before. I never told you about my work before I opened this shop. You thought I was a watchmaker my whole life. Weren't you? Gabriel asked, a cold chill running down her spine. You fixed watches for the neighbors. I fixed things, Arthur corrected. But not just watches. In the 80s and 90s, I worked as a forensic auditor and a liquidation specialist for a group of private interests in Zurich and London. My job was to find money that people like Marcus tried to hide, and my other job was to dismantle companies that lost their way. Gabriel stared at him. What are you talking about? I retired because I wanted a quiet life for you, Arthur said. But a man like me never truly retires. We just go dormant. He opened the leather binder. Inside were documents, not just papers, but stock certificates, land deeds, and complex organizational charts. Marcus works for Vanguard and Pierce, Arthur stated. It wasn't a question. Yes? And Vanguard and Pierce is currently trying to close the biggest deal of the decade, Arthur continued. They are trying to acquire the development rights for the Hudson Yards extension project. Marcus has bet his entire career and the liquidity of his firm on this deal, closing by Christmas. He mentioned a big merger, Gabriel stammered. How do you know this? Arthur tapped a finger on a document in the binder. It was a deed for a holding company called Ethelgard Trust. Because, Arthur said calmly, Marcus thinks he is negotiating with a board of directors in Singapore. He thinks he is buying the land rights from a faceless conglomerate. But he isn't. Arthur looked at his daughter, and for the first time Gabriel saw the true power radiating off him. It wasn't the loud, flashy power of Marcus. It was the terrifying, silent power of an iceberg. He is negotiating with me, Arthur said. The Ethelgard Trust is mine. I own the land his firm needs to survive. And because he signed that waiver today, relinquishing all rights to Vance family assets, he has absolutely no idea that he just handed me the switch to the electric chair he's sitting in. Arthur closed the binder with a soft thud. Dry your tears, Gabriel. Tonight Marcus celebrates. But tomorrow we go to work. I'm going to teach your ex-husband a lesson about the mechanics of power." Monday morning arrived with the cold precision of a Swiss train. Marcus Sterling stood on the balcony of his new penthouse in Tribeca. It was a sterile, glass-walled fortress that cost $15,000 a month. Money he was now freely spending since he no longer had to hide it from divorce attorneys. He looked out over the city sipping a protein shake, feeling the master of his domain. His phone buzzed. It was Damian Pierce, the Pierce in Vanguard and Pierce, the big boss. "Marcus." Damian's voice was clipped urgent. "What's the status on the Hudson Yards extension? The board is getting twitchy. We've leveraged 40% of the firm's liquidity to prepare for the buy-in. If we don't secure the land rights from this Ethelgard trust by the end of the quarter, we are overexposed. Badly." "Relax, Damian," Marcus said, leaning against the glass railing. "I've dealt with these offshore trusts before. It's usually some senile British heir or a faceless board in Singapore looking for a payout. They're stalling to bump the price up by 1% or 2. I'm scheduling a call with their legal representation today. I'll have the deal signed before the Christmas party." "Don't get cocky, Marcus," Damian warned. "This isn't a mid-market flip. This is the firm's future. And yours." "It's done," Marcus said, ending the call. He checked his reflection in the glass. Perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect life. He had shed the dead weight of his marriage, and now he was about to close the deal that would make him managing partner. He didn't know that the senile heir he was imagining was currently sitting 3 miles away, dipping a biscotti into lukewarm coffee, plotting his destruction. In the back room of Vance Chronometers, the mood was studious. The previous night's shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, hard determination. Gabriel sat at a workbench, but instead of gears and springs, the surface was covered in files. Arthur stood before a whiteboard he had wheeled out from a closet. He looked less like a watchmaker and more like a professor of war. "Rule number 1 of high finance, Gabriel," Arthur said, uncapping a marker. "Information is not power. Withheld information is power." He drew a circle on the board and wrote Vanguard and Pierce inside it. Then he drew a larger circle around it, labeled the trap. "Marcus thinks he is a predator," Arthur explained, his voice steady. "But he is merely a scavenger. He looks for companies that are bleeding, and he kills them to sell the parts. He has never built anything in his life. That is his weakness. He doesn't understand structure. He only understands liquidation." Gabriel looked at the documents. "So this Ethelgard trust. You really own it, how you've lived in this apartment since I was born." "We drove a station wagon." Arthur smiled, a wry twisting of his lips. "In 1988, I uncovered a massive embezzlement scheme within a British shipping conglomerate. The man who owned the company was grateful. He didn't have cash, the theft had nearly bankrupted him, but he had deeds to swampland on the west side of Manhattan. Back then it was worthless. Industrial waste. He transferred it to a blind trust in my name as payment." Arthur tapped the board. "He thought he was giving me dirt. But I knew the city would expand. I sat on it. For 30 years I paid the taxes, kept the trust dormant, and waited. Now that dirt is the only access point for the new Hudson Yards luxury district." Gabriel shook her head, amazed. "And Marcus needs it." "He needs it desperately," Arthur corrected. "Vanguard has already bought all the surrounding air rights, but without my plot of land, the keystone, they can't build the foundation for their skyscraper. If they don't get the land, their other investments collapse. They lose millions, maybe billions." "So we just say no?" Gabriel asked. "We refuse to shelter." "No." Arthur said, his eyes gleaming. "If we refuse, they'll just sue us or find a workaround. We don't say no. We say maybe." He picked up a thick file. "We string him along," Arthur said. "We make him believe the deal is happening. We let him commit more and more money to the project. We let him leverage his personal assets to buy into the deal. And then at the very last second, when he is fully exposed, we pull the rug." The shop bell chimed. Arthur's demeanor instantly shifted. He hunched his shoulders, put on his thick glasses and shuffled toward the front room, transforming back into the harmless old watchmaker. It was a courier dropping off parts. But the transformation chilled Gabriel. She realized she didn't just have a father. She had a master spy on her side. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat in the boardroom at Vanguard and Pierce, flanked by Jason and Sylvia. The speakerphone in the center of the table was the focus of their attention. "Mr. Sterling," a voice crackled over the line. It was smooth British and impeccably polite. "This is Silas Thorne, representing the Ethelgard Trust." Silas was an old friend of Arthur's from his London days, a barrister who charged £500 an hour and possessed a voice that could make a death sentence sound like a dinner invitation. "Mr. Thorne," Marcus said, leaning back, putting his feet up on an empty chair. "Let's cut the chase. We're offering 20% above market value for the land rights. It's a generous offer. We can have the paperwork drawn up by end of day." "That is a compelling start," Silas said. "However, the trust is not merely interested in capital. The beneficiaries are quite particular about the integrity of the buyer. They require a vetting process." Marcus rolled his eyes at Jason. "Vetting process, we're Vanguard and Pierce. We manage $4 billion in assets. Our reputation is sterling. Pun intended." "Quite," Silas replied dryly. "However, the trust requires full transparency. We will need to see your firm's liquidity projections for the next 3 quarters, and specifically the personal investment commitments of the partners involved, to ensure skin in the game, as you Americans say." Marcus hesitated. Showing personal financials was unusual, but he was so arrogant, so sure of his position, that he dismissed the risk. "If that's what it takes to get the ink on the page, fine," Marcus said. "I'll have my team send over the data. But I want a letter of intent signed by Friday." "Send the data," Silas said, "and we shall see." The line went dead. "Pompous Brit," Marcus muttered. "He's bluffing. He just wants to see how deep our pockets are, so he can squeeze us." "Should we really send the personal liquidity reports?" Jason asked nervously. "That shows how much debt the partners are taking on." "Send it," Marcus snapped. "What are they going to do? They're a trust, not a competitor. They just want to know we aren't going to go bust halfway through construction. Once I close this, Jason, I'm buying a yacht. You can come clean the deck." Turned. 2 days later, the first twist of the knife occurred, though Marcus didn't feel it yet. He was walking out of a high-end jewelry store on 5th Avenue. He had just purchased a diamond bracelet, not for Gabriel obviously, but for Sylvia. It was a thank you gift for her help with the divorce paperwork, and perhaps a down payment on future late-night meetings. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, buttoning his cashmere coat against the wind, he saw them. Gabriel was walking out of a pharmacy, holding a small plastic bag. She looked tired. She was wearing a coat he recognized, one that was 3 years old. Beside her was Arthur, walking slowly, gripping his cane. Marcus could have just walked away. He could have ignored them. But Marcus Sterling couldn't resist an audience. "Well, well," Marcus boomed, stepping into their path. "The gruesome twosome." Gabriel froze. Her grip on the pharmacy bag tightened. Arthur stopped, lifting his head slowly. "Hello, Marcus," Gabriel said quietly. "Shopping for discount vitamins." Marcus laughed, gesturing to the pharmacy. "I suppose the private healthcare plan got cut off yesterday. Rough transition." "We are doing fine, Marcus," Arthur said. His voice was raspy. Marcus looked down at the old man. You look frail, Artie. You know, I was telling my colleagues the other day. It's a shame about the shop. With the rent hikes in the Lower East Side, how much longer can you really keep that dusty little museum open a year? 6 months. The shop has survived worse than rent hikes, Arthur said. Marcus smirked. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He tucked it into the breast pocket of Arthur's cheap cardigan. "Here," Marcus said. "Buy yourself a nice lunch. On me. Consider it the last bit of alimony you'll ever see." Gabriel stepped forward, her eyes flashing with rage, but Arthur caught her arm. His grip was iron hard. He stopped her. Arthur looked down at the money in his pocket, then up at Marcus. He didn't remove the bill. "Thank you, Marcus," Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly neutral. "I will be sure to invest this wisely." "You do that?" Marcus laughed. "Maybe buy a lottery ticket. It's the only chance you people have." He turned and walked away, whistling, feeling like a god. He didn't see the look on Arthur's face as he watched him go. It wasn't the look of a defeated old man. It was the look of a sniper adjusting his scope for windage. "Why didn't you let me throw it in his face?" Gabriel hissed, shaking. Arthur plucked the $100 bill from his pocket. He held it up to the light. "Because, my dear," Arthur said, "pride is expensive, and Marcus just paid for our filing fees." Arthur tucked the money away. "Come." Silas called. "Marcus sent the documents. We have his financials. We know exactly where he is vulnerable." "Is it bad?" Gabriel asked. "It's worse than I thought," Arthur said, a predator's grin finally breaking through. "He's leveraged everything. He has taken out loans against his future partnership shares to buy into this deal. If the deal fails, he doesn't just lose his job. He owes the bank $12 million he doesn't have." Arthur started walking, his limp seeming to vanish as his stride lengthened. "He thinks he's playing poker," Arthur muttered. "But we are playing chess, and he just moved his queen directly into my line of fire." By the following Tuesday, the atmosphere on the 40th floor of Vanguard and Pierce had shifted from ambitious to suffocating. The air conditioning was humming at a low, expensive purr. But Marcus Sterling was sweating through his Egyptian cotton shirt. The Hudson Yards extension deal, internally codenamed Project Ethelgard, was stalling. And in the world of high-stakes private equity, a stall was as dangerous as a crash. Marcus paced his corner office, the Manhattan skyline looming behind him like a silent judge. He had promised the board a signature by Friday. It was now Tuesday afternoon, and Silas Thorne, the ghostly British barrister representing the trust, had gone radio silent for 48 hours. Every time Marcus's phone didn't ring, his anxiety spiked. "Call him again," Marcus barked at Jason, his junior analyst, who was currently watching his career flash before his eyes. "I've left 3 messages, Marcus," Jason stammered, tapping furiously on his tablet. His secretary, a woman who sounds like she was born in the 1800s, keeps saying he is in deep consultation with the primary beneficiary. "Who is this beneficiary?" Marcus snapped, slamming his hand on the mahogany desk. The vibration rattled his Newton's cradle. "Is it a person? A board? A charitable foundation?" "I need a name. Jason. If I have a name, I can find a pressure point. I can find a price." "We can't find one," Jason admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The trust structure is ancient, Marcus. It loops through the Isle of Man, bounces to a shell company in Delaware, and ends up in a blind, charitable foundation in Zurich. It's a dead end. Whoever owns that land doesn't want to be found. They are ghosts." Marcus loosened his tie, feeling the constricting grip of his own ambition. He hadn't just promised this deal to the firm. He had bet his life on it. Unknown to anyone else, Marcus had secretly borrowed $3 million against his unvested equity in the firm to front the initial capital requirements and bribe city officials to expedite zoning permits. He was betting that the deal would close. His year-end bonus would be 8 figures, and he could pay off the loan before anyone noticed. If the deal died, the loan would be called. He would be insolvent. The rich Marcus Sterling was actually a man standing on a trap door with a fraying rope around his neck. Just then, the phone on his desk trilled. It was the private line. Marcus snatched it up, forcing his voice into a smooth, commanding baritone. "Sterling. Mr. Sterling." The voice on the other end was clipped, aristocratic, and agonizingly calm. It was Silas Thorne. "My apologies for the delay. The beneficiary has been deliberating." "Deliberating?" Marcus let out a forced, confident chuckle. "I assume they're impressed. We're offering 20% over market value. It's the golden ticket, Silas." "They are concerned," Silas said flatly. Marcus froze. The blood pumped loudly in his ears. "Concerned about what?" "They are concerned about liquidity," Silas replied. "The trust has noted that Vanguard and Pierce has several pending litigations regarding other developments. The beneficiary is a traditionalist. They are worried that if they transfer the land title, your firm might go into receivership before the foundation is even poured. They do not wish for their family legacy to become a derelict construction site." "That's absurd," Marcus spat, gripping the phone receiver until his knuckles turned white. "We are solvent. I sent you the financials. We manage $4 billion in assets. Paperwork can be massaged." Silas countered his tone, suggesting he knew exactly how the game was played. "The beneficiary requires a show of good faith, a personal commitment." "What kind of commitment?" "A cash deposit," Silas said. $5 million, but here is the condition, Mr. Sterling. It must come from personal funds of the lead partner, not firm capital, not a line of credit from the bank, liquid cash from your own accounts. This ensures you have, as you Americans say, skin in the game." Marcus felt the room tilt. $5 million. He had the money. Of course he had the money. It was sitting in the encrypted cold wallets and the offshore shell accounts in Malta. The $12 million he had stolen from Gabriel during the divorce. But to access it, he would have to bring it back into the SWIFT banking system. He would have to expose it. "That's highly irregular," Marcus said, his mind racing through the implications. "Why not a corporate bond?" "Those are the terms," Silas said, his voice hardening. "Take it or leave it. We have a conglomerate from Shenzhen on the other line. They are willing to wire the funds by noon tomorrow. They are not asking questions." It was a bluff. Deep down, Marcus knew it had to be a bluff. But could he risk it? Could he risk losing the deal that would make him king of New York? "Fine," Marcus hissed. "Send the escrow details. You'll have the wire by tomorrow morning." "Excellent," Silas said. "A pleasure doing business, Mr. Sterling." 3 miles away, in the dim, dusty light of Vance chronometers, Arthur Vance hung up a burner phone and carefully removed the SIM card. He snapped the plastic chip in half and dropped it into a jar of acid he used for cleaning corroded brass gears. He took the bait, Arthur said, turning to his daughter. Gabriel was sitting at the workbench, but she wasn't looking at watches. She was looking at a flow chart Arthur had drawn on a whiteboard. It looked less like a business plan and more like a battle map. 5 million, Gabriel asked, her eyes wide. Dad, he'll never pay that. He's too greedy. He loves his money more than he loves himself. He loves winning more than he loves money, Arthur corrected, wiping his hands on a rag. And right now he thinks he is buying his way into the CEO's chair. He thinks that 5 million is just a temporary deposit that he gets back once the deal closes. He doesn't realize that the deal will never close. Arthur tapped the whiteboard where he had written escrow account. Liechtenstein. The escrow account is real, Arthur explained, but the terms of the escrow agreement, which Marcus won't read because he's arrogant and rushing, state that the deposit is non-refundable if the buyer fails to meet the moral integrity clause of the contract. Gabriel frowned. Moral integrity clause. Since when do property deals have that? Since I wrote this one, Arthur smiled grimly. It states that the buyer must not have been involved in any fraudulent financial activity in the preceding 5 years. If they are found to be in violation, the deal is voided and the deposit is forfeited to the seller as a penalty for wasting time. Gabriel understood immediately. But he did commit fraud. He hid the assets during our divorce. Exactly, Arthur said, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying intelligence. But we have to prove it. And to prove it, we need him to move the money. Once he wires that 5 million from his offshore account to the escrow, he creates a paper trail. He links his hidden illegal money to a legal contract. He hands us the smoking gun. Arthur paused, looking at his daughter. However, the trap needs one more spring to snap shut. We need to isolate him. We need to make sure that when he falls, he has no one to catch him. Sylvia. Gabriel said the name, tasting like ash in her mouth. The woman Marcus had left her for. The shark in a skirt. She is his weak link, Arthur agreed. Marcus is paranoid. He doesn't trust anyone. But he needs Sylvia because she handles the regulatory compliance for the real estate deeds. If she turns on him, he's finished. She won't turn on him, Gabriel said. She thinks she's going to be the next Mrs. Sterling. Arthur slid a manila envelope across the desk. Not if she thinks she's about to be the next Gabriel. Tug. The encounter was staged with military precision. Arthur knew Sylvia's schedule better than she did. He knew she attended a boutique Pilates studio in Soho every Tuesday at 6:00 p.m. Gabriel was waiting in the lobby, feigning interest in a display of organic juices when Sylvia walked out. Sylvia looked sleek, predatory, and expensive in designer athletic wear. When she spotted Gabriel, she paused, a cruel smirk curling her lips. Gabriel, Sylvia said, her voice dripping with faux pity. I didn't think you could afford this place anymore. The membership fees are steep. Gabriel looked up. She didn't have to act hard to summon the pain. She just remembered the nights she spent crying on her father's couch. She let her shoulders slump. She let her voice waver. I'm just using a guest pass, Gabriel murmured, clutching her bag. I'm actually leaving the city soon. Oh. Sylvia checked her smartwatch, clearly bored. Moving on, good for you. Marcus said you were taking it hard. He said you were clingy. He wins, Gabriel said, looking at the floor. He always wins. But Sylvia. Sylvia sighed, rolling her eyes. What, Gabriel? Gabriel stepped closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. She looked around nervously, acting the part of the paranoid, broken ex-wife perfectly. "You should be careful," Gabriel whispered. Sylvia laughed, a harsh metallic sound. "Careful of what Marcus adores me. We're partners, in life and business." "That's what he told me," Gabriel said, her eyes filling with well-timed tears. "He told me we were partners right up until the day he emptied the joint accounts. But that's not what I mean. I mean, the exit strategy." Sylvia's smile faltered. The confidence cracked, just a hairline fracture. "What exit strategy?" "I found a phone." Gabriel lied. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. "When I was packing up the apartment, an old burner he forgot to wipe. It had messages, Sylvia, encrypted ones. He's not planning to stay at Vanguard." Sylvia frowned. "That's ridiculous. He's about to make managing partner." "No." Gabriel shook her head frantically. "He's leveraging the Hudson Yards deal to get a massive buyout, and then he's jumping ship to Black Rock. He's taking the top client list with him. And he's not taking you. You're lying," Sylvia snapped, but her eyes were darting back and forth, calculating. "Check the LLC filings for the new deal," Gabriel whispered. "The Ethelgard Incorporation papers. He told you he put your name on them as a partner, right? To protect your commission." Sylvia didn't answer. The silence was confirmation. "Just check the papers, Sylvia," Gabriel said, backing away toward the door. "If your name isn't on the officers and directors list, you're already gone. He's just using you to do the dirty work before he cuts you loose, just like he did to me." Gabriel turned and walked out into the cold night air. She didn't look back, but in the reflection of the glass door, she saw Sylvia standing frozen in the lobby, her face pale, the seed of doubt blooming into a poisonous flower. That night, alone in his penthouse, Marcus Sterling sat before his laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. He had accessed the offshore accounts via a VPN routed through 3 different countries. The screen showed a balance of $12 million. It was beautiful. It was his freedom. He typed in the transfer details. Amount $5,000, $1,000. Destination, Ethelgard Escrow Services, Liechtenstein. He hesitated. His finger hovered over the enter key. A primal instinct warned him. This was the point of no return. Once this money touched a legitimate bank, it left a footprint. If the IRS saw this, if Gabriel saw this, no, he muttered to himself, pouring another glass of scotch. Gabriel is a nobody. She's gone. And the IRS can't touch Liechtenstein. I close the deal, I get the deposit back in 2 weeks, and I double my net worth. He thought about calling Sylvia. He wanted to brag. He wanted to tell her he was the master of the universe. He dialed her number. It rang and rang. Click. Straight to voicemail. Weird, Marcus muttered. He assumed she was in the shower. He looked back at the screen. He took a deep breath. He pressed enter. Processing. Transfer complete. $5 million vanished from the dark web and reappeared in Arthur Vance's trap. The jaws had snapped shut. At that exact moment across town, Sylvia was sitting at her kitchen table. Her laptop was open to the Vanguard and Pierce secure internal server. Gabriel's words, check the filing names, were echoing in her head like a curse. She pulled up the draft documents for the Hudson Yards Incorporation. She scrolled past the legalese, past the zoning codes down to the section labelled Article 4 Officers and Directors. Her name was nowhere, not even as a witness. "That bastard," Sylvia whispered. The betrayal hit her harder than she expected. She wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. She realized she was just another gear in his machine, destined to be replaced. She grabbed her phone. She didn't call Marcus. She didn't call her therapist. She dialed the number for the Vanguard and Pierce Internal Compliance Officer. "This is Sylvia," she said, her voice trembling with cold, hard rage. "I need to file an anonymous report, Priority 1. It's regarding a partner engaging in unauthorized outside negotiations and potential money laundering. Yes, it's about Marcus Sterling." Marcus Sterling spent 18 hours in a federal holding cell before his lawyer, Greg, managed to post bail. The bond was set at an exorbitant $2 million, requiring Marcus to sign over the deed to his Tribeca penthouse as collateral. He walked out of the precinct into a swarm of paparazzi. The headline on the New York Post was already circulating on Twitter. "Sterling Silver private equity star arrested in laundering probe." "Get me out of here," Marcus hissed, diving into Greg's car. "It's bad, Marcus," Greg said, driving fast. "Vanguard fired you for cause an hour ago. They're distancing themselves, and the SEC has frozen your domestic accounts. They can't freeze the Liechtenstein escrow," Marcus snapped. "That's $5 million. It's outside their jurisdiction. I need that money back, Greg. Get Silas Thorne on the phone. Tell him the deal is off." Greg handed him a burner phone. "You call him. My firm is advising me not to have direct contact with the trust." Marcus dialed Silas with shaking hands. "Thorne, the deal is dead. Wire the deposit back, now." "Mr. Sterling," Silas's voice was cool. "I'm afraid that's impossible. You are currently under investigation for financial crimes. Per the moral integrity clause, you signed the deposit is forfeited." "I didn't read that clause," Marcus screamed. "You can't keep $5 million because of an accusation." "We aren't keeping it," Silas corrected. "The trust is donating it to a charity of the beneficiary's choice, a lovely little organization called the Legal Aid Society for Divorced Women." Marcus froze. The cruelty was specific, targeted. "Who are you?" Marcus whispered. "Who is the beneficiary?" "Come to the address I just texted you," Silas said. "Alone. If you want any chance of seeing a penny of that money again." The address was in the Lower East Side, Orchard Street. Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He ordered Greg to stop the car. He got out and walked the last 2 blocks in the rain, his expensive Italian shoes splashing in puddles. He arrived at the shop. Vance Chronometers. The lights were off, but the door was unlocked. Marcus pushed it open. The ticking of hundreds of clocks greeted him. Sitting in the back under a single hanging bulb was Arthur Vance. He was dismantling a watch with the calm precision of a surgeon. "You," Marcus breathed. "It was you." Arthur didn't look up. "Hello, Marcus. You're late." "You set me up." Marcus lunged forward, but stopped dead when he saw 2 large men step out of the shadows, Arthur's old associates from his liquidation days. "I didn't set you up," Arthur said, finally looking up with eyes like flint. "I simply gave you the rope. You were the one who tied the noose, stood on the chair, and kicked it away. Give me my money back." Marcus pleaded, his arrogance replaced by desperation. "Arthur, please, I'm ruined. The firm fired me. The feds are swarming. If I don't get that $5 million, I go to prison for tax evasion." Arthur stood up, leaning on his cane. "You wanted to strip my daughter bare," he said softly. You mocked her. You mocked me. You thought you were a shark swimming among minnows. You didn't realize you were in a tank with a kraken." Arthur pulled a document from his pocket. "I can return the $5 million, or rather I can petition the trust to reverse the forfeiture." "I'll do anything," Marcus said. "Anything." Arthur smiled. "Good, because the price of that money is a confession. A full video-recorded confession of exactly how you hid your assets during the divorce, admitting to perjury and fraud." Marcus stared at the camera lens. It looked like a black eye, unblinking and judgmental. The room was silent except for the ticking clocks. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time was literally running out. "If I sign," Marcus croaked, "Gabriel gets everything." "She gets what she was owed," Arthur corrected, "plus interest for the suffering." Marcus looked at the two guards. He looked at the door. There was no way out. He had played the game of capitalism and lost to a man who had written the rule book before Marcus was born. "Fine," Marcus spat. "Turn it on." Arthur pressed the record button. The red light blinked. "My name is Marcus Sterling." He began, his voice devoid of the charisma that had defined his career. "I am a former partner at Vanguard and Pierce. During my divorce proceedings with Gabriel Vance, I knowingly concealed assets totaling $12 million. He spoke for 10 minutes. He detailed the shell companies, the crypto wallets, the fake losses. He laid it all bare. When he finished, Arthur stopped the recording. He removed the SD card and handed it to Gabriel, who had been watching from the shadows of the doorway. She stepped into the light. She looked different, stronger. She held the small plastic card like it was a diamond. "You look terrible, Marcus," Gabriel said. "I hope you're happy," Marcus sneered. "You got your payday. You and your daddy conned me." "We didn't con you," Gabriel said. "We just audited you." She turned to Arthur. "Is it done?" "Not quite," Arthur said. He turned back to Marcus. "The trust will release the funds to the court to be awarded to Gabriel. But there is one final piece of business." "What?" Marcus asked wearily. "You have my life. What else do you want?" "The watch," Arthur said, pointing to the Patek Philippe on Marcus's wrist. "Are you joking?" "This is $100,000. And it was purchased with marital funds you hid," Arthur said. "Take it off." Marcus slowly unbuckled the watch. He handed it to Arthur. Arthur took it, inspected it with his loupe, and grimaced. "The movement is off. It's losing 3 seconds a day. Sloppy craftsmanship. Just like its owner." He tossed the watch into a bin of spare parts. "Get out of my shop," Arthur said. "The police are waiting for you outside." Marcus stumbled out into the rain. True to Arthur's word, a squad car was waiting, lights flashing silently against the wet pavement. As Marcus was handcuffed and placed in the back, he looked through the window of the shop. He saw Arthur and Gabriel standing together. Arthur put his arm around her. They weren't looking at him. They were looking at a grandfather clock, adjusting the time moving forward. Marcus rested his head against the cold glass. He had lost the divorce. He had lost his job. He had lost his freedom. But the worst part, the part that would haunt him in his cell for the next 5 years, was the realization that he had never really been the winner. He had just been a temporary malfunction in the Vance family machinery. And he had been fixed. The trial of the United States versus Marcus Sterling was the spectacle of the season. It wasn't just a financial crimes case. It was a public dissection of a man's ego. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, former colleagues from Vanguard and Pierce, who were there to distance themselves, and in the back row, Arthur Vance. He wore the same beige cardigan, looking for all the world like a grandfather who had wandered into the wrong room. But Marcus, sitting at the defense table in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit, couldn't look at him. Every time he glanced back, he felt the phantom weight of the moral integrity clause crushing him. The evidence was overwhelming. The video confession Marcus had recorded in the watch shop was the centerpiece. The jury watched in silence as the Marcus on screen, arrogant, terrified and desperate, detailed the complex web of offshore accounts in Malta, the crypto wallets and the calculated poverty he had pleaded during the divorce. Sylvia took the stand on the third day. She didn't look at Marcus with love or even pity. She looked at him with the cold calculation of a survivor. She testified about the Project Ethelgard deception, confirming that Marcus had used illicit funds to try and buy his way into a partnership, all while planning to betray the firm. Her testimony was the final nail. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for white-collar hubris, delivered the sentence. "Mr. Sterling," she said, peering over her glasses, "you treated the law as a suggestion and your family as a liability. You hid $12 million while your wife struggled to pay rent. You attempted to corrupt a legitimate business transaction with laundered funds. This court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 5. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Marcus was led away. As he passed the gallery, he finally locked eyes with Gabriel. She wasn't smiling. She didn't look triumphant. She just looked finished. She had closed the book on him. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. Gabriel stood next to her father. "It's over," she said, taking a deep breath of fresh air. "The legal part is over." Arthur nodded. "Now comes the restitution." The settlement was swift. The court awarded Gabriel the full $12 million Marcus had hidden, plus punitive damages for emotional distress and legal fees. Vanguard and Pierce, desperate to avoid further scandal, settled a separate civil suit with the Ethelgard Trust for an undisclosed sum to release them from the contract which Arthur promptly gifted to Gabriel as consulting fees. Gabriel Vance was now a very wealthy woman. But she didn't buy a penthouse. She didn't buy a sports car. She bought the building on Orchard Street. She renovated the apartments above the shop, turning them into low-cost housing for single mothers going through contentious divorces. She called it the Sterling House, a final ironic joke that Marcus would never appreciate. But the biggest surprise came a month later. Gabriel walked into the shop to find Arthur packing a bag. The shelves, usually cluttered with clocks, were oddly bare. "Going somewhere?" Gabriel asked. "The work here is done," Arthur said. "The trust has other assets that need managing. There is a winery in Tuscany that is being mismanaged by a corrupt nephew. The primary beneficiary is concerned." Gabriel smiled. "You're never going to actually retire, are you? Time waits for no man." "Ellie." Arthur winked. "And neither does justice." Marcus Sterling sat in the recreation yard of the FCI Otisville Correctional Facility. He was thinner now. The arrogance had been scrubbed off him, replaced by a dull grey resignation. He spent his days in the prison library, shelving books, earning 12 cents an hour. A guard approached him. "Sterling, letter for you." Marcus took the envelope. It was heavy, cream-colored paper. No return address. He opened it. Inside was a single photograph and a newspaper clipping. The photograph showed the new Hudson Yards Extension Park. It was beautiful, lush greenery, public art installations, and a playground. In the center of the park, stood a large antique-style clock tower. The newspaper clipping was from the New York Times real estate section. The headline read, "Mystery Donor Gifts Prime Real Estate to City for Public Park." Marcus read the article, his hands shaking. Marcus dropped the letter. Arthur hadn't just stopped the deal. He had never intended to sell the land for profit. He had held on to $1 billion plot of dirt just to use it as a trap for Marcus, and then gave it away for free. It was the ultimate power move. It said, "Money is a tool for you, but it is a toy for me." Marcus looked up at the sky. He started to laugh. It was a dry, broken sound. He finally understood. He had been playing checkers against a man who owned the board. Meanwhile, back on Orchard Street, the sign above the shop had changed. It no longer read Vance Chronometers. Inside, Gabriel sat at the main workbench. She was dressed in a sharp blazer, her hair cut in a stylish bob. She looked nothing like the scared woman who had walked out of the divorce court a year ago. Across from her sat a young woman crying. The woman was holding a stack of papers, shady pre-nuptial agreements and threats from a powerful husband. "He says he'll destroy me," the young woman sobbed. "He says he has lawyers who can bury me. He says I'll get nothing." Gabriel picked up a jeweler's loupe and inspected the papers, just like her father used to inspect a broken mainspring. "He says a lot of things," Gabriel said calmly. She opened a familiar leather binder on the desk, the same one Arthur had used. "But tell me, does your husband have any offshore accounts, maybe in the Caymans?" The woman looked up surprised. I think so, but I can't prove it." Gabriel smiled. It was a Vance smile. Dangerous. Precise. "We don't need to prove it yet," Gabriel said. "We just need to find the loose gear. My father taught me that every machine, no matter how complex, has a breaking point." The bell above the door chimed. Arthur walked in, tanned from his time in Tuscany, carrying a bottle of wine. He saw Gabriel working, saw the focus in her eyes, and he stopped. He didn't interrupt. He just hung his coat on the rack and listened to the rhythmic ticking of the clocks. The shop was in good hands. The legacy wasn't about watches after all. It was about making sure that when the powerful tried to steal time from the weak, the Vance family was there to reset the clock. And that is the story of Marcus Sterling, the man who thought he won the divorce, only to lose everything to the father-in-law he underestimated. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of life, the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. Marcus thought wealth was his weapon, but Arthur Vance knew that information and patience is the only currency that truly matters. What did you think of Arthur's long game? Was the punishment fitting for Marcus, or did he deserve even worse? And be honest, if you found out your partner was hiding. $12 million. Would you have handled it with Gabriel's grace, or would you have gone full scorched earth? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on, because you never know who is holding the ladder.